Let's just go through the headlines first of all. I've obviously already mentioned this major news on the front of the Sunday Telegraph with Liz Truss having written for the paper. Just make sure you can see that here. Truss, I was brought down by the left-wing economic establishment, she argues, with a nice new photograph of her. She's come out of hiding for that. The Mail on Sunday. 2 new clues in search for missing Nikki. This story of this young mum having gone missing still hasn't been solved, so they've covered that. They've also got this extraordinary story which the Sun on Sunday has got on the front. I'm the older woman who took Harry's virginity. Again, that's one to discuss in just a moment. Sunday Times. They're saying Sunak's threat to pull out of the ECHR. We've not heard that before from the Prime Minister, so that's an interesting angle that the Prime Minister now might be thinking that's the only way to solve the migrant crisis. Here's the Sun on Sunday. I referred to that just now. They've done a joint buy-up, it seems, with the Mail on Sunday for the lady who took Harry's virginity. That's the story that keeps on giving. The Observer, 0 chance Tories will meet pledge of 40 new hospitals. Of course, that was one of Boris Johnson's trademark pledges during the leadership and beyond, that he would build 40 more. I think the Telegraph did a story that they've only started work on about 6 of them. Sunday Mirror, my hell as Tory MP's slave. Again, an extraordinary story about a Tory MP's treatment of a housekeeper in his care. And then the Sunday Express, lives at risk after cancer plan is ditched. And it's very appropriate. I've got the Sunday Express in my hands because I'm joined now by Fleet Street legend, in her own lunchbox, Eve Pollard, who once edited the Sunday Express and the Sunday Mirror. Let's get straight into it, Eve. What have you chosen for your first story?
You've got to go with Liz Truss.
You have to.
I mean, if I was Liz Truss, I'd be lying down in a darkened room for another 6 months. But she's come out, says she's not blameless, says that she wasn't given any advice about what would happen to pensions, which, of course, were the first things that started to collapse the minute she brought out her policies.
Do we believe her on that, Eve?
I'm not sure, but I'd love to know. I'd love to ask the department. Did none of you help her?
Yes.
And, of course, she thinks she's got another chance. There's another person having a go at Rishi. I mean, all these ex-prime ministers coming out having a go at Rishi.
If it's not Boris making his interventions on Ukraine this week and giving interviews, it's now her. When you said she should have laid low for a little longer, is that what you believe? Should we not really have heard from her for, what, a year?
Well, 44 days as a Prime Minister is some sort of record. And, in fact, whatever you say, the Tories are in a very difficult position now to attack your leader, as it were, right now, so early. You'd have thought she might have waited to see how things were going next year.
Or is it a defence? It seems to me that she is trying to, in a way, rewrite her political epitaph by making this point. Let me just pull out this particular quote, which I thought was interesting. She's talking about pushing water uphill when it came to trying to push her own economic policies. This is partly because we Conservatives had failed to make these arguments enough since 2010. She's saying that they were triangulating with Labour policy, this idea that the Tories have gone too red on economic policy. It's right that she's holding Tory feet to the flames on this, isn't it?
It is right. And, of course, she talks about she didn't realise how much vested interest was staged in the blob. And the blob, of course, is her way of referring to the civil service and the orthodoxy of all the sort of people on the financial side. And she's right in a way that we now seem to be in a country that believes in high taxes, and that will get us out of trouble. And, of course, when they put this to the party members, not, remember, MPs, and said growth is good, the party members put their hands up and said, we'll go for that. Yes. But, of course, it was totally the wrong moment.
If you didn't go for it, you were in the anti-growth coalition, weren't you? I mean, is it a bit lacking in self-awareness, this, though? Is she showing enough contrition?
Well, it's not so much contrition, but timing is everything in politics, as we know. This is too early, too soon, and you're battering against a Prime Minister who's trying to say, I am going to make a difference, I am going to change the way that the water is running, as it were. Very early to come out.
Too early. Now, we've picked as oversharing story of the weekend this extraordinary tale where both the Sun and the Mail appear to have tracked down the woman who really took Harry's virginity. Give us some context to this, Eve, because I know you read Spare, and it was the gory details were in that, weren't they?
Gory details were in that. And, of course, Rupert Everett, the actor, said yesterday he knew who the girl was. It turns out she's Sasha, who was working with the horses at Highgrove, Prince Charles's home. Now, what is interesting, she's rather sympathetic to Harry. She said this was a fumble in the jungle, well, actually, behind a pub.
Yes.
She says it all happened within 15 minutes.
Yes.
And it's fairly close to the description he has, where he said she treated me like a stallion, slapped my ramp and went off.
Yes, although there's one notable exception in that she isn't quite the older woman I had in mind.
Not mine neither.
So she's 2 years older than him, which actually makes her younger than Meghan is.
Exactly. It's
so
quite
it
interesting.
wasn't quite the kind of elder stateswoman.
No, it wasn't the sort of courtesan who was showing him the ropes. And what is terrible, because when you read this story and it goes on and on, they've never talked or texted or seen each other since.
No.
It's not ideal for your first outing.
No, but it was maybe many people's first outing is like that. But it was a bit, yes, it was kind of like over in one episode and that was that. Do we think that 17 pages of news copy should have been devoted to this?
No. But, you know, the truth is this story took on a life of its own. And if we'll pay 20 million to write a book, the publishers want every single detail. They can go it, and he gave it to them.
But you're a former tabloid editor. I mean, did you look at the book and think this is TMI, too much information?
On many, many things. Let's not go into all the details. Too much information about his personal things, about his personal parts of his body.
Yes, frostbitten genitalia.
20 million, you know, you have to give them everything.
Well, indeed you do. Now, there's another interesting story. It's not related to his one-night stand with Sasha, but it is called Operation Harry in a Hurry.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, in the Mail on Sunday, they're saying, and I think another paper, they're saying that they now think that Harry will come over from the coronation, but on his own. He'll come over for 48 hours. That may be the answer. I think that the King very much wants him there. And I think he probably feels it's another, perhaps a way to somehow make up in this terrible, terrible riot between them both. And if he does fly over, I suppose it will be less of a circus. We'll see him, I hope, sitting with the royal family.
But no Meghan.
No Meghan, and no, we hope, talk about what they said and who said what and who was friendly to.
But what's your hunch on that? I mean, I personally think it's unlikely Meghan's going to turn up. I think they'd be very worried about a negative reception.
Correct.
We've been in a situation where the King has twice been almost egged.
And there could be boos. There were boos outside St Paul's Cathedral, if you remember.
Yeah, louder boos this time round after the book.
I would think so. I think people are quite shocked. Whatever the family, don't wash your dirty linen in public. I mean, it's never a good thing.
Although it does look reasonable by the King if he just extends the invitation.
Yes.
Then it's in the Sussex's court, and then if they reject it, they then look unreasonable. They're in as difficult a position, really, as the royals, in the sense that they're going to look truculent and like they're not trying to kind of calm very troubled waters.
And there are stories in the paper this morning that America is starting to fall out of love with them because they just moan and whine. And the Americans quite like our royal family.
Yes.
They love the pictures, they love the pageantry.
Well, they don't like the curtain being pulled back either, I think. They don't like this kind of Wizard of Oz-esque expose by Harry.
Yes.
Now, on to completely different matters. This front page of the Sunday Times on Rishi Sunak and the ECHR is interesting because we'd associate this thinking with the likes of Suella Braverman, but not necessarily the Prime Minister.
Except I think this is Sunak's threat to pull out of the ECHR. And that's if Strasbourg says that when we decide to go for whatever the rules are going to be, the new rules about immigration, whether you can land here, how legal you are, whether you can be sent straight back, if the European Court votes against us, he feels he can pull out of the convention. I think this is a test of two things. Immigration matters a lot to many people in this country, but also competence matters a lot. And I think they want to see something started, finished, completed and carried out. And I think that's very important.
Also, I think it's the issue he has to solve if he's got any hope of winning the next general election. Eve Pollard, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Lovely to see you this morning.